Hi everybody, welcome to the Tuesday Tips. Now we are in spring here and I thought, well, what better way to actually start our spring than having fun with our patterns. So for today we're really going to now look at patterns as in our garment patterns, and I wanted to take you through just doing a bit of color blocking. I want you to just start working a little bit with a basic pattern and just change it up a little bit. I know the word is going around as well, which is called pattern hacking. You'll be seeing a lot of your patterns out there. They're talking about the options for pattern hacking. But I want you to look at a pattern like a basic t-shirt pattern, and we're going to cut it apart and we're going to make something totally new out of that basic pattern. We can go and change the necklines. We can change the sleeves. I can do different color blocking ideas. There's just so many ideas on Pinterest as well. So all of this now is really having fun with the sun coming out and just having nice weather for a change. So I'm going to first talk to you now, like I said, about the color blocking. And in order to do your color blocking, I want you to go to surferdesigns.com. And if you go to the shop section, go to free products, I want you to go and download some templates for us so that you can play with me and actually do the changes on the template. Now, Surfer Designs will have a shirt kit pattern or a shirt half scale block. We've also got the bodice, which have got the darts in, which is lovely. Again, if we start playing with woven garments, we have got darts to move darts around and all of that. And I'm literally asking you guys to go do this. I know not everybody is doing Surfer Designs with me yet, but that is my aim. I want you to feel how much fun it is to actually play with your patterns and to design your own patterns. So this is really a teaser for you if you are a total beginner to starting with pattern design, really. So you're going to go and download the shirt front for me and the shirt back. There's also a sleeve that you can go download. I've got all three of them here, because we are going to talk about taking your basic t-shirt pattern. Now, all of us have somewhere in our pattern stage, we've got a basic t-shirt pattern. It can be a V-neck, it can be a round neck, anything that you know that you've used before and it's a nice fit on your body. Also, again, it can be fitted, it can flare slightly. If you don't have a pattern yet for t-shirts, go and have a look. Just go Google. There is such a lot of free digital patterns out there on t-shirting as well. So go choose a pattern and download it for yourself. And then you can literally, with that one pattern, you can go and design all these styles that we're seeing now. Now, you're going to download this for me so that you can draw with me. But before I start with it, I just saw some fun items. I just want to open my iPad here, and I'm going to share some photos with you. Now, we can really make the color blocking as complicated as we want, or just keep it nice and simple for just a nice plain style that we want as well. Let's have a look at some of the photos now that I found on Pinterest that I just wanted to share with you. There is just so many ideas out there for us that you can literally, for years and years, you can use that one t-shirt pattern and you can just go and design. But the first one I wanted to show you is the white and the two blue colors. Look how beautiful that effect is, just with having that, and it's literally just, you can change the neckline. We've got a solid line going through, and then one of the panels we're going to divide in half again. So that is actually quite an easy change for us. Look at this black and white and almost like a tanny, or not tanny, but camel color. Let's call it a camel color. Look how beautiful that is as well. Again, quite a striking look. And again, if you look at the lines, and that's where I want you to look at the style lines, you can see that it's still a t-shirt pattern that we're looking at. And then another one, and I sometimes love the color blocking because the plainer it is, I don't know, the more striking it sometimes is. So if you look at this one now with the soft gray, the pink and the white, there's not a lot to this top. It's really just going down the center. And then we've also got a bit of gray on the side. Now it almost looks like they've added a princess line if you go and have a look at where the gray and the white, actually the seam line is. But that is really just the style line that I'm going to add in. Remember, if we are working with princess lines, it's usually a dart manipulation that I've done where I've taken a bust dart and I've moved it either into the armhole, or I've used it, moved it to the shoulder. So I'm just transferring the dot. So I'm still having the bust shape that I want, and it's usually moving around the apex of the bust. So what we're looking at here, and I'm talking more designing now, so some of you might feel that you're not too sure what I'm talking about, but I am going to be slowly bringing in designing into the Tuesday tips for you as well, just to see, for you to see how interesting it is when we start talking about it. But working with a t-shirt pattern, this is really just a style line that I'm going to draw in that's going to look like a princess line. So that is another beautiful top. Look at this white, grey and black. Don't you think that's quite striking? Again, very plain. If I do this, you can either go and keep the black on the back and just keep it plain, or you can decide to take that stripe onto the back as well. And if you are going to do your color blocking, again, make sure that where that line ends, when you draft the next line on the back, that those pieces are matching up. We want matching lines going all the way around the body. So that was also a beautiful one. Again, I'm going to look at this yellow and black. Very, very plain, but that is so striking. And you know, with our previous Friday feature, we were talking about the yellows, and I can't wear yellow on my face, but if I'm looking at this, because of the color blocking and because of the black that's there, sorry, I don't know, there's stuff coming through here on my iPad, and I'm working on my iPad here. But if you look at the black, for me, I would be able to use something like, or make a top like that and still add the yellow, because I think that black is going to make the difference and not just have everything on here. And another thing that I wanted you to have a look at is also look at the buttons. There's buttons added to it, which is just giving it that total designer look. So we should really start looking at things like that when we're looking at the photos, and see that just that little bit of a touch that we can add to our t-shirt to actually make it look as if it's come out of a boutique. So that was another one that I wanted to share with you now, is this light gray and darker gray. Very, very plain. All it's got, it's just that divide running from, I would say, above the bust, just going to that where the apex is, more or less. Look at the style lines. I want you to really go look where those lines are running, because that's going to give you an idea when you're going to work with color blocking. But what I also love about that is look at the iron-on crystals that they've added. It's just taken it from a plain t-shirt. I had a t-shirt I made very similar to that, but it looked more like a sportswear. Now if I look at the crystals on there, it's actually just made it so much prettier almost. Another one that I'm showing you, and you can see I'm not showing you very complicated. You can go as complicated as you want. You can go and really break up this pattern and do how many pieces you want to add in there, but I still tend to like to be more conservative when I'm doing it. For me, it just looks more sophisticated almost in a shirt if I'm not going crazy with all different blocks and colors and all that. Now look at this one that I'm showing you. Isn't that just beautiful? And this one is taking it over to the back. I mentioned previously, you've got to make sure that your side seams are going to match. So if you're going to do the color blocking front and back, look how perfectly it's matched over on that side. And for me, this is such a lovely top. And again, if we look at the lighter color there, I really just need a bit of leftover fabric that I've got in my stash that I can actually add to these tops. Now, please go ahead and go and print for me these templates, because I'm going to now just do an example with you on how it works and what's important to look at when you are doing color blocking. And I'm going to talk to you about seam allowances and why you have to remember to add your seam allowances to your color blocking. I want to take you through 2 samples that we're going to be doing, and I want you to look. This one unfortunately printed very lightly, but if you look at that, you can see what it looks like. And if I zoom in, you can see we've got the gray there. I'm just looking at where the design lines are. We're working with another template as if we've got a t-shirt. You can see that this one is not your normal, it's really hanging over the shoulder, and it's not your normal sleeve that we've got on there. Just ignore that for now. I'm not going to go into designing any of that. I really want to concentrate on the color blocking that we have over here. So I'm going to show you how I will plan that, as well as this one. And once you understand the way that I look at the pattern and looking at the style lines, then you can literally go to any Pinterest image and you can go and design it for yourself as well, using already your t-shirt block that you have. Now, the first thing that I'm going to look at, if we are looking at that, and I'm going to bring my pictures together here, that I can see really, if I'm working with half a pattern, I've got really a mirror image to that side. I can't see, I can only see a little bit of gray there, so I'm assuming that this side and that side is exactly the same. It's just the coloring of the white and the pink that's different. So I know already that I can go and work with my pattern piece where it is just a pattern piece like this, because once it is on the fold and I've designed it, then literally I'm just going to cut with my other fabric color. I will cut the left side, for instance, or the right side. If it is a design like this that we are working with, then I have to make sure that I've got a full front pattern piece. I'm just going to design on the front for us so you can see. So then I need a full pattern piece. So all I've done, I've taken my piece of paper, I've taken this one, I've just put it on there, I folded my plain paper, put this on there, and I just went ahead and cut it out so that I've got a full pattern piece to play with. This is really for me the planning. So even if you are going to be working on your full size pattern, I still go and I just plan it on here. It's almost like just looking at the recipe. What do I want to do? So I go ahead and draw my lines. I plan it on here as well, and then I can put that in a file, and later on I can always go back and see what I did with the design that I have. I've got a reference file where once I've done my planning, I would actually put the planning and I'll put the photo in as well in my file. And that's just for me to go back later on. If I want to play, I want to maybe change something to it. So let's have a look. We'll start with this really plain one, and there's not a lot on here. And what I would usually do, I would go and have a look. As I said, please ignore the sleeves. Usually our sleeves that we have, we've got that underarm hole basically going there. I'm not going to work that in now. That is really, if we start going into the designing, I just want to concentrate on the color blocking. So I'm seeing that I do have, and I'm going to draw my line so you can also see clearly. I can see that I do have a V-neck. All right, so I would want to go and do the V-neck. And again, you can go play. You can keep it a round neck, whatever you would like to do with that. I can also see I've got a design line running down the center. And like I said, it almost looks like a princess line, but it's not really. But I'm going to design it going into the armhole now. And then this was my side seam going from there. Now, if you actually go and look at that, this is already looking like a pattern piece. So we're not looking at that. So there is my one pattern piece with the neckline, shoulder line, armhole going into that area. That will be my side panel. That is literally all I need to be able to do this pattern for myself from my t-shirt. So I'm going to now take this, and we are going to start looking at how do I want to design it. Now the first thing is, if I'm going to do a V, is how far down do I want that V to go. And we all have this little hollow in our neck over there, and all you've got to do is measure from there down to where you want the V to be. You're just going to literally measure from there. And then that is also, I must say, that is really if it's applying to a jewel neck, because when I design, I always start my design with a jewel neck. Otherwise, what you can go and do is, if you've already got some sort of neck line basically there, rather take it from this point over there and then just go and measure down more or less where you want that line to be. Can you see there? Because some of our designs already, as I said, I've got a ready-made or a commercial pattern that I'm using, so I don't have a high neckline like that. And then I do want to go and make sure that everything is going to fit perfectly. But I'm going to measure down there. So I already know I will go measure down from my pattern, and I will say I want my V-neck to be over there. And I'm going to also decide, because I'm working from one of my patterns already, which I know is right next to the neck. Can you see her opening there? I'm talking you through everything you've got to consider. There's that neck going basically there. If I had a jewel neck, her neckline would have been sitting over there. So I can assume that I want to go in about 2.5 centimeters, which is 1 inch. I just want to mention, go back to something else. If you're using a commercial pattern, really try and get a round neck t-shirt that's quite high up there. Otherwise, it can be, if you are new to designing, it really can affect your design. Or if you've made it before and you know where it's sitting on your shoulder, then you can decide to not go in like what I'm doing over here. But with mine being more closer fitting, like I've drawn there for you, I can go from the neck point and I can decide I'm going to go in so much. You will usually go in, if it's a dual neck, from about 2.5 to 5 centimeters. 5 centimeters is already pushing it, because then we start losing a bit of structure to the garment. I'll start showing my my bra strap. So you've got to be careful of that as well. But measure more or less on your body where you want it. And that is what's nice when you're working and making patterns for you. You go to your body and you measure. So let's say I went back about 2.5 centimeters or an inch that I want for myself. I'm just going to use this little ruler, but you do get bigger rulers that you can use. And I'm just going to see if I can get a nice little angle going for myself. Now, if we design a V-neck, we don't want a straight line. We always want a slight curve, because that is just going to almost make it hug your body. So I'm just going to, with the small ruler, do that sort of curve. Can you see? And that's just going to give us really a nice hugging neckline if we go and do that. So I know that's going to be my neckline. Obviously, when you're also looking at doing the color blocking, again, I don't want to get too complicated. You've also got to decide, what are you going to do for the neckline? I might just decide to do a little fold in over there, or you can do a neckband, whatever you want, but that's what you will have to consider. Now I'm looking at the underarm. I'm looking at my photo. And I'm designing it. I know for myself there might be too close to the underarm seam. I'm going to rather go more from there, and I make a marker for myself. But again, a true princess line will always run across the apex of the bust. We are not doing really a princess line. This is a looser fit t-shirt that we're working with. So I can decide that I am going to go in, and I'm really looking, where is that? But again, I can go change anything I want. So I can decide I want that little bit to be there. I don't have my big ruler. I just want to see if I've got my big designing ruler. I found my Sure-Fit ruler. You do have your French curves as well. I love designing with the Sure-Fit, because that is just giving me all my shapes, my hip shapes, armhole shapes, neckline shapes, and also for adding seam allowances. And I can go and play with this, and I can say, let's go this way. Now I can see, okay, if I'd go with that curve, I don't want to go past there. Can you see? It's really planning. If I was working with a pencil, I can go and erase. I think it's going to go in better into that area from where I want to do it. So let's go and draw that line. As I said, this is a style line. It's really, for me, not a princess line. It looks like a princess line, but it's not a true princess line. So that is all I need to do to go and recreate this top for myself. But if you look at it now as well, and I'm going to always write, I know that this is not going to be on fold, because I've got to have a seam down there. So I will have to go and add seam allowance. Wherever I'm going to be cutting apart, I need to add seam allowance. If I don't add seam allowance, and this is really a tip that you must go and memorize, that we want seam allowances added. If I just cut, because that is basically going to be my stitching line. If I cut here and I just sew again, and I don't have seam allowance, I make my top smaller by that amount. So I've got to be careful of that. And another thing as well is that, because I'm cutting my pattern apart, I do want to make notches. So I might decide that I'm going to make a notch there, and I might decide to make a notch there as well. And another important thing is grain lines. We don't want to forget to add a grain line. And the grain line is already on this pattern piece. I'm going to come and just do a bit of a grain line for myself over there, so I know what the layout should be. So let's go and have a look. I know there's a lot of newbies out there that hasn't designed before. This is totally new to you, but I really want you to start looking at style lines on clothing. Imagine those pattern pieces, what it's looking like, and imagine also sizing. because I've got a stitching line and I've got a cutting line on a pattern. And I have to make sure that for this one, what I've actually now went and cut was basically on my stitching line. So I need to add seam allowance to have that cutting line. So that is basically, guys, that is the pattern piece. And I can go and say that this is my center front. And I can go, if you're doing on the back as well, it's so important to actually say that this is the side front. This pattern pieces are very small, but those are things that I go and add. And because we are going to work with 2 different colors, I can go ahead and even on this side, go and add a notch. Remember, a notch is where I'm going to line up my pattern pieces that I've cut out again, so that everything is going to be put back together and be matching. But now the last step that we are going to do, I'm going to add seam allowance. So I just want to tape this on there. So you would have, remember, you would have copied your pattern onto either your white trace or even a tracing vellum. And all I have to do now is go and add seam allowance. I'm not going to measure it. When we design also, I design with my Sure-Fit Designs ruler. And can you see the opening that I have there? The opening closest to the edge. If I draw my line in there, that gives me my 1.5 seam allowance, which is what we usually have on our commercial patterns. And that is basically your basic allowance that we work with. Now I will go then, if it was my big pattern, use my ruler and I would just put it on that edge and go and draw it. But we are working with a small pattern, so I'm just going to do an imaginary seam allowance. I am adding seam allowance here because I know that's a seam. I've cut this apart. I am not adding seam allowances on the armhole or on the shoulder. That was already done on your commercial pattern. Your pattern that you started with already has seam allowance to it. Now, I'm not adding there. I'm just adding where I know I'm going to cut. This one, if your pattern said cut on fold, I have to go and add seam allowance, because that seam allowance is again for me to sew together. If it was, or saying, let's say it wasn't on fold and it said cut 2 pattern pieces, then that is fine. Let me just get another piece of seam allowance here. Paper for seam allowance. Just going to do a little bit there and there. Oops. So we always go and add seam allowances wherever I know I've created a style line. So with this one, because I am going to do 2 panels of 2 different colors, I need my seam allowance. And I've cut myself a neckline. Obviously I would have put paper there and I would have added my seam allowance on the neckline as well, depending what I'm going to do with the neckline. And then this one also, you would put it onto a piece of paper. Let me just grab one last piece of paper. I'm just using my scraps that I've cut off, but you would go put that together and add seam allowance. Then this pattern piece is ready for me to go and cut on my fabric. But I'm just going to repeat this. This is really, really important. You are working with a commercial pattern that's already got seam allowances in there. I don't need to add any allowance for the hem. That's already included in the commercial pattern. I don't need to add anything onto the armhole or onto the shoulder. That is already included in my commercial pattern. I'm adding seam allowances where I am creating a style line. A style line is where I've gone and drawn, and that is going to become a line that's part of my design now. We're going to talk about this one, but look at the style lines on this one. So wherever I'm cutting my pattern apart, and that will become my style line, I add seam allowance. Now this is also a style line because I've got a white and a pink. That has become a style line dividing my pattern there. So that is why I went and I did a seam allowance. I'm cutting 2 pattern pieces. It's not on the fold. So please always go and add that. If I don't do that and I don't add seam allowances, I'm sizing down my pattern. It's not going to fit my body. So let's go again and do another one. So let's have a look. So I'm just going to work on this one now. And first off, again, I'm going to take you through, let's look at the style lines. So I can see that I have, I'm just turning it a bit, I can see I've got more of a round neck on this one. I can then see from over there as well, I've got this style line which is running over there, and then this panel piece also gets divided. It gets a style line which is going there. So I know now already I'm going to have 3 pattern pieces, and I'm going to have 1, I'm going to have, you can't really see it there, 2, and I'm going to have 3, and that has become my pattern pieces that I'm going to work with. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to copy the style lines onto my pattern piece. Now, because we are working with a line that's running basically from one side of the body to the other side, I need a full pattern piece. I don't need a quarter pattern, which is usually what we get in our commercial patterns. So I've gone and copied a full pattern. I will always go and start with the neckline, because the neckline is an important part of where I'm going to run the style line from. So I will go and decide. I'm just going to do a rough one for you so that you can see. And again, drawing a, I just want to put it this way, drawing a line from there to there, I might not get it equal. So when I do my neckline, I am going to just fold my pattern a little bit, and I'm going to decide, I'm going to go in again. This is really just a rough design that I'm doing to show you. If I really work on my big patterns and I go into designing, there's a lot more information that I would share with you. But I want you to have it as easy as possible. I'm just looking at that. I think I'm going to drop it even in a little bit more. If I'm looking at that picture, it's gone in a lot more. And I'm going to... let's use this ruler. I just want to try and get some sort of curve going there, which is going to give me a nice line. One thing that I do want to mention, again, if we design, this part must always be at a 90 degree, otherwise I'm going to have a bit of a V forming in the center. And all I'm going to do, let's say we are doing a style, I'm just going to go with this one as it is. It's not the right ruler for this, because it's such a tiny neckline. I'm just going to do that. Let's just cut it away so it doesn't confuse us. I'm really working with a Coke here. If I was working with a pencil, I can always go correct. It almost doesn't really look too circular, but let's go a little bit in. I am just guessing here now, so I'm going to just go in and cutting it for us there. There we go. That's the neckline that we do want. Now we can go and have a look. If I am looking at this picture, I know my first line or my first panel, it comes more or less from this side. I'm just making a little bit of a mark. If you're working on your big pattern piece, you will go measure on your body. And if you're looking at this as well, can you see where the zip is? This is the stuff that I'm looking at. There's the zip, and it's gone over there. So it's not too close to the side. So where the center of the body is where the zip would have run, and I'm just looking, and it will be more or less over there. And that is my first markers for my pattern. Again, you can go with a straight line. I'm not someone that likes designing too much with my straight lines. I do like to give it just that little bit of a curve. It just sits a bit better on our body if we do have that slight. Not extreme curve, it's very, very tiny, just that little bit over there. And now I can go and see that was my one side. This is now literally one pattern piece, but this pattern piece is also divided. And again, look at, she's got quite a bit still left of the black there, so I'm going to imagine that it's about there. I just want it coming past the front of the body, just curving past the front. And if we are going to say, I'm going to go about on there. And can you see how I've drawn it and how it's draping? It's also got that slight curve over there. So again, I'm going to go and just give it a slight curve. Let's just bring this a bit closer so you can see. And it's really not too curved. It's a very slight curve. So I'm trying to get it on there. It is a slight curve. So that is how easy it is to break up a pattern to copy this. But now what I do, again, we never ever forget our notches. I'm just going to do 2 notches over there. So that is where I'm going to sew these 2 pattern pieces together. And because I've got 2 pattern pieces there as well that I'm sewing together, I just want to make sure that I do give myself a little bit of a marker on that area, because I might be using 2 different fabrics that's got a slight difference in stretch. So I want to make sure that all of these will be matching up. So that is my notches that I'm going to give myself. And the last thing that I'm going to do is add grain line and then seam allowance. So I'm going to make sure to add a grain line on all these pieces, and always go and see one of your pattern pieces will have the grain line already, and you would just go and make sure that it runs parallel to your other grain line that was already drawn. So I'm just going to make sure. If you don't add a grain line, you are going to get a pull on your fabric. It's going to twist around your body a little bit. And then my last bit that I'm going to do, I know that this is going to be 1, 2, 3. So I know I'm going to sew, and this is my little thing that goes in my file, my little recipe. So I know pattern piece 2 and 3 will be sewn together, and then this whole pattern piece gets sewn to my 1. All right, and that is literally how you plan it, guys. There is no science really to color blocking. You've just got to go and look for style lines and add the style lines back onto your pattern. So I'm cutting very skew here because I'm not cutting right where I can see, trying to stay out of the view of the camera. And then I'm just going to do this. Can you see there? And now the last bit that I've got to do, we've remembered our notches, we've remembered our grain line. I have to, wherever I've cut apart or where I've cut away, I have to add seam allowance. So seam allowance will go onto this line, these 2 lines, and on this line. And obviously whatever neck finish I decide on, I've got to go add seam allowance for that as well. And then we've done this pattern. So by the time I go sew it, I put my notches back together, I sew that seam together, this then gets sewn back together onto that pattern, and you end up with a t-shirt that's looking like that. That is really all there is to color blocking, and that's how easy it is. And this is really for you also a taster to see when we start designing, because with designing we've got a sloper that's already fitted to our body, and then I can go and look at any style and I can go recreate it. Could you see how easy it is to actually take your basic t-shirt pattern and just change it into a totally different style? Now that for me is really what designing is all about. It is fun. I'm seeing something that I want to create. I don't have to go look for patterns for it. I've got a basic pattern or a basic block that I can use and just recreate what I'm seeing, with a couple of changes obviously that I want to add in as well, or to suit my shape at the end of the day. So that is for me really the designing process that I always go through, and I wanted to share it, even though it's more tips on telling you, remember the grain line, remember the notches, all of those things if you start playing with your patterns. For me, I also wanted to make you aware of how much fun it can be when once you start looking at doing something like this. You look at garments totally different. You start looking at design lines. I'm not looking at this picture and saying, wow, the fabric is beautiful. I go and say, oh, there's a line going there that looks like a princess line. There's a dot over there. There's a pleat over there. That is what I'm looking at, and that's what I then recreate on my pattern, because that's all I need. All the information I really need to put it onto my pattern that I want to design. And as I mentioned before, I know there's this term going around and everybody's talking about pattern hacking. I don't really like that term, because for me, once, even if it's a commercial pattern, once I take that pattern and I go walking around and I'm looking for my fabric, or I'm going through my stash and I'm starting to put my fabrics together and I'm deciding, okay, I want to add this, I want to do this, I want to add a button. That is part of designing, guys. That is what designing is all about, is I'm taking my fabric, I'm putting it to the pattern. So for me, really, I'll never talk about pattern hacking. You will always hear me talking about you are designing your pattern or your top, because that's all it is. And really, you don't need a degree to go and do this. Look how easy it was just going through the steps that I took you. So I want you to now actually go and start looking at images on Pinterest, and I want you to see how you can just a basic t-shirt pattern, change it into all these beautiful tops that's out there. All of them start with the basic pattern, and that is the t-shirt pattern. Most of our knit tops out there are just changing the neckline, changing the length, changing the sleeve length. I didn't go into the steps now of doing that drop shoulder that we had on that white and pink and gray top, because that is really going into designing. Then I want you to play with your existing t-shirt pattern that you have and start looking at what you can do. So for me, I want you to try having fun with your patterns. Start getting creative with it. And if you feel now, if you've done these steps and you feel you really enjoy it, I want you to go to my website. It is www.surferdesigns.co.za. And I want you to go and look. I've got an online course that I've actually recorded, and it was for a closed Facebook group. But I've had a lot of people contacting me and saying, please, I'm not on Facebook. How can I join this course? So I am busy this week loading it onto YouTube. And from Saturday, it will be available on a private YouTube channel. So you can go and follow the link that I've given you now, and I'm putting it in the description box as well. You can go and purchase that class. It's called Not Your Ordinary Tee. And I take you through how to sew your t-shirt, all the tips and techniques on sewing with the knits. I work from if you're sewing on your sewing machine or your overlocker. I give you all the tips, and we sew a basic t-shirt together. Included in the course, I give you a link for a beautiful free digital pattern that you can go and download to sew. So you already don't really need to have a pattern already. You're going to download that digital pattern. And then I take you through a couple of designing processes where we change that sloper, and that basic t-shirt, we do a cowl neck, we do a bit of color blocking. So there's a couple of ideas that I actually take you through how you can start designing. So if you think, well, this was fun, then I'm going to tell you, go and have a look at that online course and join me. And remember, if you are going to purchase that course, you do want to just wait till Saturday for your link that I'm going to email you. If you're on Facebook, I can immediately get you on the group. But if you are on, as I said, not on Facebook, and you want to watch on YouTube, you will get the link for the private YouTube channel where you can go and have a look at it. So go and have fun, guys. Go play. There is just so much creativity around us that we can pull from when we start making our clothes, ideas out there. So go and have fun and enjoy the rest of your week, and happy sewing.